And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Well, at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership, the original website where we've got about 8 years worth of data. Heck, I've got a John McAfee interview up there somewhere. That's, if you want sheer entertainment, and yet feel at the same time you're at the virtually in the political equivalent of a driver's ed film where you wake up and find yourself in the passenger seat. That would be one of them. Let's get down to tonight's appearances. Joining us again this week is someone who's been a friend of the show for a number of years, as we like to refer to him, and a handful of people really have attained this status as repeat offenders. Under the Biden administration, he would be well past the 3 strikes and out and would be interned for life in some nameless, shapeless federal penitentiary deep in the Colorado foothills that he reserves for felons, drug addicts, and folks who are actually literally lovers of freedom. Of course, he is Connor Drigotas, truly a early what we call ourselves 21st century Renaissance man. He's a university professor, if you will, teaching communications and at Lehigh University, my alma mater. He is engaged heavily in the not-for-profit world, working on communications and messaging, both political and non-political. And he's an author, and we're going to talk tonight, begin the conversation, if you will, on his latest work for Liberty. And is all around regarded as one of the rising voices of the Liberty movement. When I say the Liberty movement, I'm moving past, say, party politics, and someone who is able to provide keen insight, but also keen advice on messaging. One of our biggest challenges in the Liberty movement, yes, messaging. So welcome back to the Coalition, Connor Drigotas. By the way, you can always find him at ConnorDrigotas.com, where his entire body of work resides, as well as links to literally a plethora of publications that he routinely contributes to. Again, Connor, welcome back. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. I think I might steal some of that audio and use it for my new Twitter bio after the Biden administration. I love that.
Yep, 3 strikes, you're out, buddy. There's no, as someone dragged out, I think it was either on Fee or maybe it was The Hill, dragged out that old campaign message that he used so aggressively in the 90s. And of course, there's no hiding from Biden. I think he'd like to walk that one back, wouldn't he? But before we get into the book, and we have to do a little bit of a weekend review. What you are seeing, in my estimation, and you are, as I mentioned, a keen observer, yet one of the things I enjoy about your work is you're clearly within the bubble, so you get the inner workings of the body politic. But at the same time, you're able to, and I don't know how you do this. Maybe we should talk about this one show when we're snowed in one night or something. How is it you are able to remove yourself from the same said bubble and stand outside of it and able to kind of have that out-of-body experience and look down from outside, from within? That's what I enjoy about your insight, because for so many of us, we're just too deep into it. We're not capable of really looking at these issues and messaging and all of the entire body, if you will, as an outsider, as what normal people, or as what we call in the Libertarian Party, the normies, how the normies think. So, I'd love to know how you do that, but what say you on the final stunning days, almost reminiscent of the Americans' last stand in Saigon, if you will, of the Trump administration, and will we get to a point where Trump officials will be airlifted by helicopter off the top of the White House? Connor, take it away, buddy.
I appreciate your kind words, and I'd love to say that it was me just having some sort of Zen experience that allowed me to transcend what's going on. But I think the smartest thing that I did this election cycle was simply delete the apps that were pushing this news at me all the time. And it's given me an opportunity to think more about what's going on and why it matters instead of getting caught up in that 24-hour news cycle. To your point, though, this past week has been a news cycle to remember because we're in Trump meltdown mode. It actually was kind of funny. It came home to roost a little bit. One of my friends is an election coverage reporter for CBS, and Trump retweeted him, calling him a liar, calling him a fraud. It was a really cool moment for him professionally. But at the same time, it was one of those moments where I realized, if this guy, younger guy, if he's already getting attacked, and he does a wonderful job in what he does, Trump is really swinging right now. He's in a position where he knows it's over. It's getting clearer by the day that it's over. Even if he were to pull it out in the courts, he doesn't have the support that he would need to lead an effective government. We're in a moment that I've never seen in my lifetime, and I cannot wait for it to be over.
It's, possibly because of it being a Veterans Day, HBO has been re-showing the movie Midway, which is a stunning movie to watch. And clearly, if you like lots of explosions and planes blowing up and aircraft carriers and all that cool stuff, it's a pretty good movie. But one of the undercurrents of that movie that I take away from it was how the variety of characters reacted to and changed in the light of the power struggle that was clearly happening within the Japanese Navy, and at the same time, how to conform, if you will, or how to make the best of having to conform to what the prevalent thought of the moment was. And I look at our American military, and though it's obviously a very top-down organization, they've always showed remarkable flexibility in working with the officers and the grunts, the boots on the grounds, if you will, whereas the Japanese Navy was pictured as being incapable of challenging authority or authority's thought at any moment. Is the same thing happening to the Republican Party? Are they essentially the Japanese Navy of 1942, 43?
That's such a fascinating look. I think about the first thing that jumped in my head was the Malcolm Gladwell studies, and obviously his amazing writing on how aircraft have gone down because of various power structures, in which a co-pilot will say, hey, we're getting pretty close to that mountain, but they won't actually challenge the mountain that they're about to hit until it's too late. It's been one of the big problems in societies where there is a big hierarchy and where you do not question authority. Unfortunately, maybe fortunately, actually, Americans have a culture of challenging authority, and you're seeing a lot of folks in the Republican movement generally jump ship. And at this point, whether that's lawyers refusing to take up these challenges or, folks just moving on with their lives on the grassroots side, it seems to be that Trump's support and Trump's base is abandoning him. And I think at this point, it's well justified. The folks who are left behind, like the Giulianis, are not putting their best foot forward. They are coming across as credible. And the end is going to be that much messier. All that we can really hope for is that when this is said and done, when it's over, we can continue with our amazing American tradition of a peaceful transfer of power. And we can all look forward to a gridlocked government where we hopefully will not see the continued erosion of our constitutional rights because the Senate should be doing its job. And that's, again, me, glass half full optimism. I'm hopeful that will be the case.
Well, and you know me, darkly cynical. The glass was half filled, but was filled with red wine that we just spilled on our new white carpet and our new white couch. That's me. And by the way, the other great career move of the week, besides your friend at CBS, had to be the guy who is formerly head of the cyber crimes, cyber investigation, cyber election. They have an acronym. I'm exhausted with acronyms at this point, but the gentleman who got fired this week as a Trump appointee because he pointed out how well the elections had gone. And Trump, in a uniquely Trumpian moment, took what should have been one of his few successes. And here's the thing. Trump had successes as a president. What was one of his few successes, which was creating that office, populating it, giving it to a gentleman who was clearly independent and clearly highly capable, and reversed a number of the trends that have been leading up, including Russian interference. And yet, in a classic Trump movement, and you have to be a little older to remember a guy named Casey Stengel, And Casey Stengel, of course, was the manager of the New York Mets during their glory days, which was when they were terrible, absolutely terrible. And he came up with I think, one of the great quotes of sports of all time. Both Trump and the Mets would routinely steal defeat from the hands of victory. And, so I mean, that guy, the cyber dude, he's got a career anywhere, doesn't he, at this point? I mean, he's got to be the most hireable man in America after pissing off Trump enough for all the right reasons and getting fired. What does that speak to?
It's nice to get criticized for competency, right? That's a great thing. And you're absolutely right too. What you just said about Trump having many victories. Walking into this election, if I was on Trump's campaign team, the first thing I would have said is focus on all the great things that you did to put money in people's pockets, to work across the aisle on criminal justice reform,
right,
to really arguably do an amazing effort to really lift up so many Americans in an uncertain time. Obviously, that is not the path that Trump decided to take, but at the end of the day, that's where we are, and that's the reality of what's happened. So we need to move past that and hope that we can return to some civility. Insofar as returning is perhaps maybe an overgenerous term to the last 4 decades or so of American politics.
Right. Well, whether it be the Democrats or the Whigs. Oops, I'm sorry, I meant the Republicans. But we have a cymbal crash somewhere on our board. Jeremy and I, our producer, we're gonna learn that one. But the Whig Party is something that you and I are going to follow over the coming months, and to see if it returns to its mid-19th century glory. I seldom have so many worked so hard to destroy a dominant position in American society. I wonder, and you and I will have to keep track of what the long-term ramifications are for said Republican slash Whig slash, I don't know. I think of all the 19th century parties. So there were some great ones out there, right? What's left after the smoke clears sometime around January 20th or so? And how much of a, if you will, a honeymoon period, as they always refer to the first few weeks of an American political administration. How many weeks of the honeymoon will Mr. Biden be accorded? Or, in fact, will the Trump supporters slash, what do they call them, maggots? Maggots, I'm not going to mispronounce it, but maggots provide in light of this literal dumpster fire that he's created? Last thought on Trump, and I know he's not going away. But last thought on Trump. If, in fact, Trump had been at all egalitarian, if Trump had at all been a gentleman, hard to imagine, but true, in the last few days, would that have led to, if you will, a continuation of his follow? Would that have been better for? Well, we know what it would have done for its legacy, but has he really stuck a fork in the political future, if you will, of this vast body of Trump supporters? I mean, remember, more Americans voted for Donald Trump than any other president, I think, in American history, other than Joe Biden right now, right?
Right. Yep. I believe that to be the case. And one of the things that I want to circle back to there is the idea of what do we do with these conservatives who at some point, they're waking up in a Biden-Harris presidency, and we're going to see them all of a sudden remember that they care about fiscal responsibility and small government, which is bound to happen. And the only thing that comes to my mind is the importance for people who care about liberty of being kind in that moment and welcoming them with open arms back into the fold of some really important principles for the checks and balances in our government, right? If we can use this time where a Biden-Harris presidency, which is going to be very progressive and very aggressive, is pushing on a very radical agenda, if we can bring in conservatives who might need a friendly reminder and a pat on the back that being pro-small government is a good thing, we can use coalitions for liberty, bring people together, and hopefully what that will mean is in 2024 and beyond, we're actually getting Republican candidates who are friendlier to the ideas of liberty because the grassroots support is going to be focused on those principles instead of whatever populism happens to rise in the years to come.
One can only hope, because despite the fact that I'm very a partisan, big L libertarian, if you will, at the same point, that has to happen, or the nation simply is incapable of surviving, particularly after the aftershocks of COVID, the aftershocks of this 25, 27, 30 trillion dollar deficit that we're going to end up with, the aftershocks of what, as you pointed out, is going to be clearly a very aggressive regime. You know, if it had been a close election, the new normal, if you will, of presidential and big government politics is to move hyper aggressively with your program, regardless, you know, facts be damned. And, you know, if you'd won by 0.5% nationally or something, they wouldn't care. Now imagine what energy and the wind that is, quote unquote, at the back of this current administration, Biden, and I got to tell you, man, there's a special place in my darkest of hearts for a new vice president. But imagine the M word, the mandate word looms large when you've beaten the other guy by 5 million votes. We're in for some tough times, buddy.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. I'm glad to have you in the corner of liberty and so many other people who are stepping up to the plate and doing what they got to do to move the ball forward for a little more freedom in our lives.
Right. This is from the media perspective, from the activist perspective, from the political perspective. This has got to be an all hands on deck moment. You know, we just, you know, have truly the final thought in terms of policy for this week, but we just came from a moment, not 2 years ago, when the notion of universal health care, or let's say universal college tuition, or college loan, permanent deferral, cancellation of all, was considered a pipe dream, because where's the nation going to get $2 or $3 trillion to do it, right? Well, we managed to find lots of money to print for this reason, which has given some people the notion that going forward, we can just continue to print money because nothing bad has happened yet, has it? And at the same time, we're facing a deficit for which some already calculate that it's too late, that we've moved past that middle mark, where even a slim majority of the nation's GDP is going towards stuff, as opposed to paying the deficit. There are some who argue we're already past the point where in order to pay down this deficit, we would literally have to shut down significant parts of the country. The deficit is growing that quickly. And the first thing being prescribed under the new administration is, yes, we need more quantitative easing. And I can't wait for the moment Republicans object to quantitative easing, having just engaged in it for the last couple of years. Boy. But let's move forward. You've got a new publication out, a book that you've written for. I've gotten through part of it. We're going to talk about it again next week. I think next Tuesday we're talking about having you back on. But let's lay out your new tome, if you will. Give us the lowdown on it. There you go. Where we can find it. And of course, your inspiration, and then let's move forward. Let's talk about your book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. And first of all, I guess the book is available on Amazon. It's called Work for Liberty, and it's a resource guide to help people find employment in the liberty movement. Unfortunately, or fortunately, necessity is the mother of invention. And this resource guide came out of a fairly difficult time in my own life. 2020 is an incredibly challenging time for a lot of people. I think it would be crazy to say that people aren't struggling. People are struggling right now across the country. But back in 2017, I was working in a job in sales. I was spending all of my free time working for liberty. I was working on campaigns. I was volunteering for organizations. I was trying to found organizations. And in July of 2017, I all of a sudden got laid off. And I found myself without a job, without any income. And I still had a mortgage. I still had bills to pay. So I found myself with this, what I first thought of as a tremendous opportunity. And I realized I'm going to do things that I love. And I made a promise I'm never going to take another job again in my life unless it's driven by purpose. Now, I was a little over optimistic. I got to say, Pat, I spent the next 6 months living off of my savings. I was struggling to make ends meet. My savings account was dwindling. But what I had was 6 months of time to simply research jobs in the liberty movement. And that's what I came out with. I ended up finding a director level job at a law firm where I'm still working to this day that I absolutely love. And about a year ago, I came across all of this research that I had done during this very difficult time in my life. And I realized, you know what? I bet this could help a lot of other people. And that was the inspiration. Let's put this together. Let's figure out a way to put practical information in people's hands so that they can find purpose in their own work. I hope that more folks who care about liberty can be doing this full time, because let's be honest, if you're volunteering for liberty, oftentimes this is the first thing to go when things get tough.
Right. And just a personal reflection on my career, or if I can dignify it with that term, there are vast opportunities now to younger people that simply didn't exist in the 80s, in the sense that, there are countless political action committees, countless consulting firms, countless amounts of folks working to and for and from literally every side of the government perspective. And that's that, in addition to the lowered barriers to entry into the media, in addition to disruption isn't even the word for the media at large, the wholesale destruction and then reconstruction, and that's currently undergoing. For those folks who are timid of heart, that would be pretty scary, right? At the same token, if you can acclimatize yourself, if you can gird yourself up for high adventure, that exists at a significant level today, doesn't it?
If you're saying that there are a ton of jobs in liberty, you are absolutely right. One of the things that I run into so often is when I'm talking to people who love liberty, and I get around to asking them, hey, what do you do for a living? What are you doing right now? And they say, hey, I work in finance, I'm a contractor, whatever it is. And they lose all the energy in their voice. One of the things that I'd really love for your listeners to understand, and for anybody who cares about liberty to understand, is that you don't have to be a policy wonk to be working for liberty. These organizations, law firms, think tanks, grassroots organizations, advocacy groups, they need everything from communications professionals to people to raise money, to lawyers, to someone to just pick up the phone and answer the phones for a business, right? These are businesses out there that have these goals. So just because you don't have a PhD in economics, that isn't a barrier to you getting a job that actually matters. A lot of people in this country, unfortunately, wake up every morning and they don't love what they do. It's a national crisis, truly, right? We make jokes. It's a cultural joke that people hate work, and that doesn't need to be the case. I'm really hoping that this book and the community that has been built around this book can be a tool to help people wake up, and we can get more allies working for liberty.
So talk about your journey then. You spent months, if you will. In the beginning, I get the sense, I wouldn't say flailing away, but just sort of reaching out in all sorts of directions. How did you right that ship? What were some of your discoveries? And I want to make sure people buy the book, so we're teasing it a little bit, but because buy that book. We're going to, by the way, we will put up on the Coalition this evening links to on Amazon where folks can grab it, because it's important, by the way. I want to throw this out there. This is an editorial comment coming from me, not my guest. But it's important that folks in the liberty movement understand that if we are to grow the organizations, and I had this conversation with a candidate this past week when we were talking offline about the need for a campaign manager. If we are, in fact, to grow the movement, we have to professionalize the movement. And so while we all envision a perfect world while we're doing it as a volunteer, quite frankly, that means that ultimately your efforts will be divided. Few people are in a position to work for liberty full time without any salary component. Number two, we need to understand that as a movement, you are not, and I want to say this carefully because I know folks who have been criticized lately for being paid professionals on campaigns and or liberty, grassroots liberty organizations. We cannot, if we expect to grow the movement, we have to accept that you're not, quote unquote, selling out if you get paid. Because if you're getting paid, odds are your focus is going to be exclusively on that, as opposed to either A, sweating out how you're going to pay the bills, or B, leaving that Zoom meeting early because you got to go out and drive Lyft at 10 o'clock at night, which is not going to leave you in a good place to follow up on that 300-page wish list that they left for you after you went, right? After you left the meeting to go on that. Because the minute you leave a meeting in the Liberty Movement, guess what? You've been volunteered for all sorts of things. Yeah, that's what you get. So speak to me about that, if you will, how important it is that we professionalize and we embrace the notion that folks need to get paid.
It's such an interesting point. And what you just said about selling out, I'd say the bigger sellout is wasting the prime years of your life doing something that you're not passionate about. Working, 40 hours a week for 40 years, that's gonna add up. For me, as I was looking at this very odd time in my life where I had a choice to make, I could go and do something that would pay the bills, but I didn't really feel passionate about it, or I could really go and put an effort to make sure that what I was doing was something I was excited about. For me, I believe that involves a lot of internal analysis, right? You really need to ask yourself where you want to be. And one of the tools that I would recommend to anyone out there who this resonates with is something called Ikigai, Ikigai. It's a Japanese concept, and it means a reason for being. And if you'd imagine it as 4 overlapping circles in a Venn diagram, what it's comprised of is these 4 concepts in these 4 circles, which are what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you can get paid for. And what I love about this is A, it's holistic, but B, it really helps you analyze where there are pain points. So if one of those things is missing, it's a heck of a lot easier to tackle a problem if you can put a name to it. So for me, I recognize that, I'm good at communications. The world needs a little bit more liberty. I love liberty, but I was struggling on the getting paid part. I was spending all my time volunteering. And for me, finding those resources, finding the community became so important. I think in the liberty movement generally, it's difficult to tell whether or not you're connected. And I think maybe I was overly optimistic, thinking that I had connections that could help me get a job in the beginning. And what I really learned over those 6 months was, A, I wasn't as connected as I should have been. And a lot of that was because I didn't have a really solid foundational understanding about what my purpose was. And that's something that we deal with both in the college setting now. This is something I look at with students, but it's also something that we're doing in the Work for Liberty Discord community, where we're actually working with people to help them better define not just, hey, I want to work for liberty, but what's the perfect job for you and how can we help you find it?
By the way, this is just between you and I. No one else is going to hear this part of the show, but you got any ideas for a late 50s kind of blabbermouth who, fairly narcissistic, but at the same time willing to engage in conversation with others, late into the night about issues that he pretends to know something about? You know anybody like that? Yeah, that's yikes. Okay, so
I can tell you there are literally thousands of jobs available in the Liberty Movement. In our Discord, I have posted at least 2 new communications jobs every single day since this thing came into existence. And that's directors, CEOs, presidents, and it's also people who are video editors, audio technicians, commentators, writers, editor. The depth and breadth of experience is all over the place. So when you say tongue in cheek, does the Liberty Movement need something like X? The answer is absolutely yes, it does. And you're doing it right now on this show. But the world is a big place, and there are tons of ways that you can get paid to do what you love.
Wow. Tell folks too, because there is a significant community out there that doesn't understand the concept of a Discord server and how you folks and where folks can find you on said Discord server.
Yeah, for sure. So a Discord server is very similar to a Slack. So Slack is a business tool. Basically, with various channels, you are able to message back and forth, actually speak with, video chat with members of a community that come together on a platform simply to share an idea. It was developed by video game aficionados to better communicate about their various guilds and clans in video game world. But what it's really turned into is what some are calling the future of the internet, which is specified communities that are the next generation of social media. That's what we built. We started with 4 of us in the Discord, and it's grown to almost 200 people right now who are there helping each other find jobs, working for liberty every single day. And that's an amazing community to be a part of.
So it almost sounds like you're taking a Reddit, throwing it in a wiki, and putting it on top of a Facebook group on steroids. Is that a fair assessment?
I'd say on top of that, it's also user friendly. So yeah, it sounds complicated, but one of the great things about it is it's fully customizable. And what we're in the process of doing, I didn't expect it to grow quite this fast. And it's a wonderful problem to have, which is we have so many people in there. We're just trying to figure out the best way to provide services. And Discord's a platform that's allowing us to do that, which is really exciting.
So talk about this voyage of self-discovery you have to take, because that's so critically important, yet, and clearly it sounds like your group exists to help someone on that. But, that requires a level of introspection that can be kind of uncomfortable for some. How does one do that? Clearly I'm probably not very good at it. I'm kind of in a permanent state of denial, but how does one do that? And what skill sets are you seeing that are in the most demand?
Yeah, to answer the first part of that question first, I think I've been pretty forward about this, that I try to be an open book about some of the more challenging things in my life, worrying about whether or not I'm going to be able to pay the bills and put food on the table. I actually published a blog for a number of years that was my annual salary and what the impact was on taxes coming out and how it impacted my family. I think one of the things that as libertarians and conservatives we do poorly is tell human stories. And I've said that on this program before, I know, but it's also not just telling abstract stories to accomplish a political goal. It's about being genuine in our relationships with other people. As you go to a conference and you see the guy who's out there networking, in quotes, and in the version of networking there is running around with a stack of 500 business cards and trying to get your business card so he can make you a sales pitch. The more time that I have found that I spend genuinely getting to know people, sharing my own challenges and helping them overcome their challenges, the world of individualism is augmented when we also recognize the part of that, which is voluntary association and being excited to help those people who share our mission and our values to achieve great things. And that's been one of the most amazing things with a community, because people are struggling. Everyone's on edge right now. I believe that the liberty movement is a movement that can lift people up. And despite the stereotype of libertarian infighting, that doesn't need to be the reality. And if you're out there listening to this program and you are struggling to find a community of people that are going to lift each other up and help you find what you need in the liberty movement, please know that those communities are out there. Obviously, I would love it if you joined our community and became a part of that, but those groups of people are out there, and you don't have to put up with the groups of folks who are going to eat each other alive. Liberty's too important, and the principles are too valuable for us to get lost in the details when we could be fighting for something great.
Right. And does this sort of shared purpose, if you will, between all the people serve to eliminate the type of trolling and the type of naysaying, for those nattering nabobs of negativity that you see on most social media platforms? Does that help carry the day a little better?
Yeah, I guess that's the second part of your earlier question too, is the exploration of purpose. And I think one of the great things that this Discord has brought together is people who are professionally minded. They've already decided they're not going to be, angry hacks. They're not going to be internet trolls. They're logging into a server where most people are posting their resume, posting links to their LinkedIn profile and saying, hey, I'm ready to get serious about this fight. I want to get paid to work for liberty. And I'm so happy to be part of a community that's fighting for the same thing. There hasn't been conflict there because it's not a transactional relationship. It's a genuine relationship of wanting to see ourselves and each other succeed, because we're all headed in the same direction. We all care about liberty.
Excellent. Well, like I said, I powerful stuff. Tell folks, and I want to get into some of the next week. Get into number one. We're going to talk about maybe the opening session salvos, if you will, of the Biden administration. But I want to continue the conversation on the book next week. Tell folks again how they can find this tome online.
Yeah, for sure. Work for Liberty at Work for Liberty Book on Facebook. The easier way is perhaps connordrigotas.com/work. That'll take you to a page where you can get free access to the Discord, where you can buy the book, and where you can also hear more of me talking about the book to give you a better picture of what we're fighting for and why it matters.
Right. What I'd love to do, and you tell me if this is a good idea or not, because so much we talk a little bit offline. We make a point when you and I talk to talk really logistics, not content, because we like to, as they say in the alt media world, we want to save it for the show. But I'd love to talk about if we can come up with some case studies, if you will, next week, and a couple of examples. We'll make them, of course, not identifiable, but some case studies of people who actually went about it, because I think that would be fascinating. It's self-introspection, I think, is highly generational. It simply didn't exist in my father's generation. My generation, we begin to broach it. Your generation is very, very good at it, and much better at the sort of honest assessment one needs to make of one's strengths and weaknesses in engaging in something like this. So I'd be fascinated in a couple of case studies if you think that would work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Self-introspection and that kind of honesty is a double-edged sword, and anything I can do to help people make sure that they walk that razor's edge in a way that's going to help them accomplish something great, I'm on board and I'm here to help.
Excellent. So I think we're talking about next Tuesday night. We'll work out the times and everything, but again, I appreciate the continuing contribution you make to our efforts here. And, if folks want to find the entire body of work, it's connordrigotas.com. Of course, it's CONNER Drigotas, DRIGOTAS.com. And, I've seen the site grow over the last year or so because of this body of work that you're generating for all sorts of media platforms. And it's just fascinating stuff. Like I say, Connor is one of those folks that I like to say answers questions before we even knew we had to ask them. And there's precious little about that right now in a time when, wow, boy, we need those type of conversations. So as always, I'm grateful for the time you spend with us, because you spend a lot of time with the big boys. But it's a reflection of your commitment to the liberty cause in general that you're so generous with your time. So I had to say that because I did not want that left unsaid. It's something I think about all the time. So it's great to have you on again, buddy.
Well, hey, thank you for your kind words, and I'm always happy to be here because I like being around good people, and you're one of them. So please, thank you, and thank you again for having me on tonight.
All right, so Connor Drigotas of Connor, CONNER Drigotas, DRIGOTAS.com. We're going to continue the conversation next week. I'm hoping that we can, depending on his schedule, because he's got a hectic one, to say the least, that we can have Connor on a few times a month, and just to have these kind of conversations on what's going on with messaging, because we need to read the tea leaves. I mean, it's funny. One other quick reflection on the movie Midway. They spent more. They were very generous with their time in talking and covering the code talkers, who were an important part of that victory, which was so. I'm glad the movie came out because it was an understated part of the World War II history. There hasn't been not nearly enough time spent on that, but we need code talkers for what's going on in D.C. going forward, and. Connor, I think you're absolutely one of them, because if we don't analyze, reanalyze, the final thought for the night, so often the American political elite broadcast their intentions, explain, and the media helps explain how heinous their intentions are. We all digest that information about how just terrible and awful some of their intentions are, and then we watch them just go do it anyway. It's kind of astonishing to watch, but the media so very often acts as sort of a cheerleader, that it's perfectly respectable and responsible to engage in some of the very behavior that has left this country so naked, so unprepared for the COVID/coronavirus crisis. And so we have to say enough of that. We need to get folks with boots on the ground who can look incisively at this messaging and these intentions that are being broadcast. And, we need to take care of them before they're allowed to grow roots. Never has there been a time in recent American history where that is more important. So, folks, thanks again for joining us tonight. Connor Drigotas. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network, coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and, of course, the original mothership at coalitionradio.us. Folks, stay tuned. In just a few minutes, we're going to have an old friend on the show come back as well. Professor Dr. Andrew Hernandez. He is the professor at your Western New Mexico University, and we're going to have some conversations with him about, the border, because the world has not stopped moving because there's a virus out there. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.